this is in the Times, Jamie. Norway shaking the oil world.
This is an amazing story. Norway shakes the oil world by dumping investments. So it's the whole process of divestment. And it's a great step for a country to take. Norway's giant sovereign wealth fund has unveiled plans to dump its entire holding in oil and gas companies in a 37 billion sell-off. What's happening is, if that can be copied by other countries as well, we're in with a really interesting opportunity to actually look like we are taking climate change seriously. Because at the moment, this species is not taking climate change seriously. When you've got a whole country that's going to divest all of its investment out of fossil fuels, we're in with a chance. Don't forget that at the beginning of last year, the Rockefeller family, the biggest sort of oil, famously the biggest kind of oil family in the world, completely divested from fossil fuels. The situation is that you're looking at $32 trillion worth of what will be stranded assets. And this isn't something that people have really spread enough, because almost all pensions in the world have some fingers in the fossil fuel pie. If we're going to seriously take the promise to stick below 2 degrees warming, which is the only way that we've got a chance as a species, then we need to start making these divestments. And if we do...
Well, what difference will it make? That's what I was saying, because, I mean, Norway...
Stop burning fossil fuels.
But well, will it, though? If they're selling off £37 billion worth of investments, but Norway is still Western Europe's biggest oil and gas producer.
Yes, it's the biggest producer. But if you have more and more countries who start divesting, what it's doing is indicating a serious move away from the use of fossil fuels, even if it's just investment. And of course, Norway is in this ridiculously hypocritical situation where, on the one hand, they're making the divestment for their own country, but the other way, they're making huge investment, huge production of oil and gas. But that's not necessarily the case, because coincidentally at the moment, people in Norway are actually taking their government to court right now as we speak. There's a test case happening, because in their constitution, 4 years ago, new phrases were woven in that were using language like sustainability. You cannot be sustainable if you still continue to mine and extract fossil fuels. So they're actually trying to stop the fossil fuel extraction that's happening off the coasts of Norway at the same time as making this divestment.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting. I mean, certainly something has to be done in the medium term, on just the basis that we're actually going to run out of fossil fuels at some point. So it's... something needs to be done,
and
clearly.
It's also important that this nation, which is admired politically by many internationally, is taking leadership on this. What's happening is that there's huge amounts of grassroots anxiety about climate change. I think it's something that politicians on the left and the right haven't quite grasped, because the issue is so big.
Absolutely.
So no one knows where to start. And it takes a kind of strong move like this to say, OK, you know what? This is not a fatalistic end-of-times scenario. There are things that you can do to combat this. We don't just sit there like a frog in boiling water, waiting for the nation, waiting for the earth to die and for Gaia to shake us off.
Absolutely, absolutely.
OK, well, sticking with a similar theme, if you like, diesel cars, certainly in Islington, this is referring to, in London.
Yes.
It's going to cost you extra to park, £2 an hour more.
Which is a huge amount, because at the moment the range is between sort of £2.40 and £6 an hour to park in Islington. But Islington Council are taking measures against older, smellier, more polluting diesel vehicles, and they're saying that in the borough, if you want to do some short stay parking, it's going to cost you this much more. And what they're hoping is that that'll discourage people from using their vehicles. But there has been some kickback on this. So a little bit further down the article, there's a spokesman from the RAC saying, look, lots of people would dearly love to sell on their smelly, old, polluting vehicles and buy something newer and fresher and cleaner. They just can't afford to. So kicking people who are already struggling and have an old vehicle into paying this much more, it's not going to make any difference. They'll just park outside the paid parking zone.
Yeah.
He also pointed out that this is not really about family vehicles. It's also really about small to medium businesses who have these vans which are quite old. They can't afford to upscale to one of these expensive, newer, cleaner, fresher vans. So,
but is it all? Will this affect all diesels or just the older ones?
Just the older ones. I think that it's really a way of taxing or making people aware of a particular kind of vintage of car that uses the polluting fuel, and it's a way of getting people to think about maybe changing. But my argument would be that people are well aware now that these are polluting fuels. It's not kind of bloody mindedness that is keeping people using them. I'm sure it's a lack of resources.
Yeah. OK, your thoughts on that would be very welcome, actually, at Sky Stephen, at Sunrise Isabel. Front of the Sun, looking at foreign aid.
Yes, so this is often the title is Our Crazy 13 Billion Foreign Aid, and it's referring to a number of revelations, such as we are using some of our foreign aid to help elderly people in India do yoga. We are helping the coconut industry in the West Indies, and we're helping African people to learn how to juggle. This is one of the classic sort of right-wing press stories where they're saying our foreign aid's being wasted on ridiculous things. Actually, a story that's much more important that people very rarely draw attention to is an organisation that was given kind of carte blanche legislation early this year by Priti Patel, called the Commonwealth Development Corporation. What's really happening with our foreign aid? It's not going to kind of these small, pointless things. Our foreign aid is mainly being used by the Commonwealth Development Corporation, who are investing in high-end investments in the majority world or the global south. So they're investing in private hotels, private schools, and the companies that are using to do this are all based in tax havens. So what we're actually doing, rather than helping the well-being of those countries, and poverty reduction, which is meant to be the aim of our foreign aid, what we're actually doing is making a lot of money out of those countries. That money is going into investments by British companies who are based in tax havens that are accumulating wealth and power in those countries and doing nothing with poverty reduction.
Well, we can't. I mean, I don't know about that, so we can't actually give anyone the right to reply at this point on that. But if what we're saying is some of the money, at least, is going to these schemes which are bonkers, and you're saying a whole lot of money is going into schemes which is doing other things.
Profit-making for this country.
Right, OK. So therefore, that fuels the argument for those people saying we should get rid of the foreign aid budget, because none of it's being used for what it should be used for.
Exactly. I wouldn't say get rid of the foreign aid budget. What you should do is actually spend it on doing what it's meant to be doing.
Well, we could cut it, couldn't we, and still provide the same amount of aid that we're actually providing now?
No, I don't
and use that money for hospitals and schools and things over here.
Oh, no. Hospitals and schools would be much better served if we actually had tax avoidance loopholes being closed down, if we stop the corporate welfare windfall that's happening.
Well, rather than giving them, I don't know, £6 billion that was in the foreign aid budget.
Yeah, I think the foreign aid budget should actually be increased, but it should be spent correctly, not for making money for private companies in this country. The National Audit Office on the CDC said it is a significant challenge to demonstrate its ultimate objective of creating and making a lasting difference to people's lives in some of the world's poorest plans. So even the NAO are saying, look, this is a very spurious kind of way of saying that we're helping other countries, where clearly we're not.
It's about the cynical exploitation also of crisis zones and fragile states in exactly the same way. I was just at a human rights conference, and someone who I won't mention stood up and said, look, there was a war in our country, and afterwards, under the guise of helping and humanitarian assistance, what actually happened was all these corporations came in and they pretty much said, you know what, forget about people's trauma, we'll just clear away the dead bodies and turn this into a luxury paradise with boutiques and hotels, and somehow that will regenerate the local society. And of course it didn't. It just created lots and lots of low-level, insecure jobs in a tourist market, but it didn't rebuild society. Right. And the whole argument was that corporations can't do what third sector organizations and NGOs and humanitarian workers are supposed to do. Capitalism can't solve human problems.
Absolutely.
And they were absolutely outraged. They were like, no, hang on, there's been no moment of recognizing that this used to be a war zone in a fragile state. It's done nothing for the trauma of survivors who are left there. It's just created this sort of silver, glowing, shining city, which tourists are going to use for some months.
Yes.
OK, well, your thoughts on that would be very welcome, as always, at Sky Stephen, at Sunrise as well. Thank you very much indeed, both of you. Let's get a check on the weather with Naz.